Is it worth going to 40k tournaments? Time for another Wonders of discussion. Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. Right, another Wonders of discussion, and in this one we're going to talk about, is it worth going to tournaments? We're going to look at this from 3 points of view. One, from somebody who's never been to a tournament or doesn't want to go to a tournament. Two, someone who's been to a tournament maybe a couple of times. And three, from seasoned tournament players. Before this though, if you would like to keep up to date with the wonders of Warhammer 40k, then please give me a sub and hit the bell button so you don't miss an upload. Well, hey, please subscribe. Okay, so let's talk about point number one. Having never been to a tournament, maybe never want to go to a tournament, maybe you're thinking about going to a tournament, but you just haven't got around to it yet. Well, I've been in this situation myself for a good number of years. In actual fact, it's only about 2 years ago that I went to my first ever tournament. So I went for around 13 years of just playing my buddies. However, in the back of my mind, I always knew there was the tournament scene, and I've always thought about going to a tournament. But to be fair, I've been a bit scared. I think going to your first ever tournament is a scary experience, and there's lots of things to consider. I remember thinking to myself, am I good enough to go to a tournament? Do I know the rules well enough to go to the tournament? Am I going to get crushed going to a tournament and just come home in full embarrassment? How am I going to get on playing a stranger? What if my tactics and my play style and the way I play my army just isn't good enough to cut it at a tournament? Those are all things that were sort of holding me back. I remember watching various videos over the years, like Fritz 40k saying you have to go to a tournament, you have to experience it. And it did get me thinking in the back of my mind, well, maybe yes, I should do. However, I was being held back. Now, it's fair to say the only reason why I did end up going to a tournament was because of my good friend John from his YouTube channel Aceface. Now, he is a seasoned tournament player, and he came around my house one day just for a friendly game, and we had that game, and at the end of it I remember saying to Ace, I said, well, how do you think I played? Do you think I'd be good enough for a tournament? And I remember him saying to me, you're absolutely fine. He said, the only thing that you don't have is experience of different armies. He said, you know your army, you know the game, you know the tactics. Obviously there's going to be a lot of armies that I would never have faced, just down to the fact that our group has a limited amount of armies between us. So of course, yes, I was pretty inexperienced with some of the armies that potentially I might have faced in a tournament. So Aceface was the one that really encouraged me and gave me the confidence that I could play in a tournament. And in actual fact, a few months later, he spotted a tournament that was quite local to me, and he emailed me and goes, right, you're coming, you know, we're going to that tournament together. And indeed, we did go to that tournament, and I had a really good time. So a massive thank you to Aceface for encouraging me to go to that tournament. Now, Aceface, as I said, does have a YouTube channel, so don't forget to check that out. It's also on a secondary YouTube channel called Twisted Dice. Check that channel out as well, because he's featured on both of them. Now, if I hadn't met Aceface, I don't think I would have ever gone to a tournament. I think I would have shied away from it, just carried on playing my buddies. But like I said, it was a really, really good experience. And I highly recommend that you try a tournament at least once in your hobby career, because I think it's something that we should all experience. It doesn't necessarily mean we're always going to like it, but I think it's the experience that we're after. So I think the way to get into tournaments ideally is to know somebody who already does it. So you can go to the event or maybe do some practice games beforehand, get an idea exactly how the format works, you know, how long the games are, what type of armies you're going to be facing, etc. It's a lot easier if you can hold someone's hand on the way to your first ever tournament event. However, even if you don't have that option, maybe it's just you by yourself going to your first ever event, I would definitely say do it. Like I said, experience it at least once. Now, whether you enjoy the event or not is irrelevant. The point is, I think you have to get an event under your belt, so you at least can say, yeah, I've tried it and I liked it, or I didn't like it. I think everyone has to try something at least once, don't they? Okay, so now you've been to a couple of tournaments, and that brings us nicely onto point number two. just like me, you've been to 1 or 2 tournaments, but you're not yet a tournament player. Okay, so after my first ever tournament experience where I had a lot of fun, I won 2 out of the 5 games, and I was feeling quite confident with my tactics and my armies, etc. I decided to have a look at maybe going to a second tournament. Now that first tournament I did really enjoy. It seemed like there were a good mixture of players there. So we had some sort of just club players that were there just for fun, and we had some sort of top end tournament players that were obviously there to win. And there was a big bar difference, let's say, between the top end of the table and the bottom end of the table. As I said, I won 2 out of 3 games, and I was happy with that. That was a result that I could take home and think, yeah, I did well. Now in terms of my list, I didn't take a particularly competitive list, but I did take quite an unusual list. I took a flayed one orientated list, and it performed really well, and it was a bit of a shocker for a lot of people, bearing in mind that this was back in 7th edition. Flayed ones were pretty good, but they were a bit underrated, or at least maybe not seen on the table quite as much. So I did shock a few people with how good flayed ones were. And that's what I really enjoyed about the tournament, is having an unusual list, something maybe which is a bit different. And I think everyone knows now who probably watches my channel, I don't tend to go with the norm. I do like to mix things up and do my own thing, really. I think it comes from watching Fritz 40k for too long, because he was a bit like that, the technology side of tactics, not necessarily taking the latest net list. So that was a great entry into the tournament scene for me. Basically, not too heavy hitting tournament, just a lot of fun and a good experience. And when it came to my second tournament, I went further afield. I actually played at War Games in the Last Chance Open. Now bearing in mind that this is an ITC type mission, where the tournament players were able to get their last ITC points. So there definitely was going to be some top end tournament players here. So I was expecting the level to be higher, and also I was expecting the tournament event itself to be a lot better as well. And no disrespect to the first tournament that I went to, but I was expecting a lot more at War Games. Obviously I've seen the War Games video on their YouTube channel, check out the YouTube channel there. And of course they also have their website, www.wargamesuk.co.uk. Definitely should check it out, some great deals on there. So I was going to War Games, my second tournament, and I went with the mission, with the idea to try to win 1 more game than I'd won in the first tournament. That was my goal, a little personal goal to win 3 out of the 5 games. And in actual fact, I did achieve that, so I did 1 better, and indeed I got more points from that particular tournament. I think I came 18th out of 58 people. So really happy with that. In actual fact, I also made a video series on that tournament experience, so check that out there. Again, I took Necrons, and I did once again go for quite an unusual list. I went for multiple small units, lots of small units of flayed ones, wraiths, immortals. It was a lot of fun, and I was really happy how I performed. And also, I really enjoyed playing my own lists, and totally different from everyone else. I didn't have a Decurion. I mean, there were other Necron players there, they all had the same stuff, Decurion stuff with the Connectic Harvest, etc. Me, I didn't play that at all. I didn't even have the Decurion in my list. There were a couple of other Necron players there, and they did have the Decurion, but I decided not to take that. I did my own thing, and it paid off. I did really well in the tournament. Well, at least I think I did really well. Now, I was never going to win it. I did get to 8th position on my very last game, and I came up against Will, love you Will, and his Riptide Wing, and I got absolutely slaughtered in 2 turns, but that was always going to happen. I didn't expect anything else. I was just maybe lucky in my journey to the top table, but I have now experienced the top table on the last game, and it felt good. It was fun. It was fun. However, it doesn't necessarily make me a tournament player, and it hasn't really turned me to being a tournament player. But what it has done, it's turned me into maybe thinking, yeah, maybe once a year I would like to go to a tournament. I don't know that the tournament scene is for me, but I definitely enjoyed it, and I do plan on going to more in the future. It was definitely a fun experience, and I've also got to meet lots of new cool people within the hobby, some of them with their own YouTube channel like Black Toad Studio, Blacktoad Studios channel just there, check them out, awesome channel, great battle reports, and two really nice guys, Tom and Dom. So that's where I've got up to in my journey of tournaments. I've really enjoyed them, I'm really glad that I've been to them, and I have concluded that I'm not a tournament player. You know, some people go to tournaments every weekend, every other weekend, travelling around the country. That's not for me. I'm more than happy just playing my buddies, or the occasional collaboration with some YouTubers, which was really good fun. Now I will go to more tournaments, but like I said, probably once or twice a year would do me. However, some people love going to the tournaments all the time, and that brings me on to point number 3, seasoned tournament players. Okay, so tournament players, these are the people that go around the country every other weekend, once a month, etc., playing in every tournament they can get. That's what they love doing. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that these type of people are ultra competitive, and I think that is the key thing with tournaments. There's a big tier of different type of people that love to do them. There are people that love just to go there because it's fun. They love going there because they love playing different people. They love going because they like to meet different people. Then you have the competitive player who likes to go to test his skills, to see how well he can command his army on the table against another top-end army. And of course, then you have that whack player, the win at all cost player. These are the players that will do absolutely anything to win, potentially even cheating. And these are the players which I think put most people off that have never been to a tournament. However, in my experience, and I've only been to 2 tournaments, I never came across anyone that was like that. I mean, everyone that I met was ultra friendly. They were there just to have fun. They were there to play the game. And even the people who thrashed me, like Will, love you Will, even those people will make sure that you have a good time, because ultimately it is all about fun, and making sure your opponent has fun is all part and parcel of it. Indeed, there are even points awarded for sportsmanship, etc. at the events to make sure that that always happens, or at least happens most of the time. Now, I'm sure you're probably thinking, okay, but what about lists at tournaments? What about those whack lists, those spam lists, those really nasty, horrible lists that some people take to the tournaments? Well, I think you've got to accept that. That is going to happen. We're talking about a competitive environment, and indeed a lot of people find that's the most enjoyable side of the hobby, fine-tuning their list as much as possible. And I think you have to say, well done to them, really. In actual fact, I take my hat off to all of you tournament players who come up with these really horrible, nasty, cheesy lists, because that isn't actually that easy to do, especially when you have to adapt your list depending on the meta. Now, we're not talking about somebody who's just got a net list off the internet and they just rolled up to the tournament, they don't know how to play the army. We're talking about somebody who studies the codex, comes up with the best combinations, works out all of the tactics and how they're going to deploy, what they're going to do if this happens, what they're going to do if that happens, working out everything, the mission type, how they're going to claim that objective, how they're going to get Slay the Warlord, etc. There's a lot to these tournament lists, in actual fact, a lot more than we think. Now, a lot of us think, including myself, that probably tournament players, all they really do is they take the best unit with the cheapest points and they just spam it out as much as they can. And yes, okay, obviously that does happen, but then there are some people that are actually very skilled at making top-end tournament lists. They're very adaptable at making those lists, and one thing which I did notice when I went to a tournament is how they push themselves in games to get every single point they can. For example, the secondary mission objectives. And what I did notice in that event was that a lot of the lists were actually designed to take specific mission objectives. Now, one of them was Slay the Warlord. There's actually some extra points there available for killing the Warlord. And I noticed that whilst my army sometimes could get a chance to slay the Warlord, most of the armies that I faced, they were specifically designed with something to help them take out the Warlord. And indeed, I lost Slay the Warlord on most of the games that I lost. I noticed that the difference between some of the good players and some of the top-end players were just getting every single point available. I.e., if there was 20 points on offer, That's what they wanted. They wanted 20 points because that's how you get onto those top tables. Getting 17 points puts you, down a little bit. So you can understand why the lists that you face at these events are actually really fine-tuned to try and get the best that they can from them. But of course there is nothing wrong with that. That in actual fact is a skill in itself. That's an enjoyment in itself for those people. As I said, I'm not really there. That isn't really my scene. However, I do want to go to more tournaments and I do want to get better. But I'm definitely not going to do it with a net list. I'm going to do it with something a bit oddball, something a bit different, and something which may be a surprise to some people. I think that potentially is a good way to go, rather than trying to compete with these top end players who play on a regular basis at a very high level. They fine tune their lists, and if you're just playing, let's say like me, once or twice a year, obviously I'm not going to be able to compete with that. However, if I take something a bit different, something which is against the meta, something which they haven't seen before, so I think that could be a good way to almost snake your way up the leaderboard, rather than pounding your opponent and tabling them. Maybe just surprise them, play something a bit different. Okay, so I'd love to know what you think about this topic. Have you been to a tournament? Do you want to go to a tournament but you're a bit scared? Or is the tournament scene absolutely not of interest at all to you? Maybe you've been to a couple of tournaments like myself. Do you want to go to more tournaments, or was that experience enough for you and you don't want to go on anymore? And to all you tournament players, a couple of questions. What do you think about new tournament players at your event? Do you thrive on that? Do you enjoy that? Do you like to show them a good time? Or would you prefer that they actually weren't there and you'd rather be playing seasoned tournament players who can really test your skills? Or do you find that person that hasn't had that much experience, that person that brings an oddball list, maybe do you find them the worst people to play because you don't necessarily know what they're up to? I'd love to hear your thoughts too. Beam me up.